On this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds, we're joined by Girish Manuel, who is an animator. We talk about perseverance, the balance of personal vision and getting user feedback, trusting others and growing a team. We discuss when to quit and setting meaningful goals. Let's get into it.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Or the Alliance.
Amazing.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined as always by Sean and not Rick. In Rick's place, we have Girish Manuel. He is the creator of a program called Micah's Super Vlog, which is an animation that is kind of awesome. We wanted to talk about really perseverance, something that is super relevant to everybody that's listening to this. If you've ever thought about quitting, this is an episode for you. We're trying hard to make things happen, and we get discouraged along the way. And as I've said before, it can be quite a lonely road making something. And so that's what we're here to talk about. Welcome to the show, Girish.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. And you can say something too, Sean.
Well, I think it was episode 193. We had Brent on with Cloudy with a Chance of Meeples. I think in that episode, I said that we had a mutual friend, and Girish here is that mutual friend. So, and you are a board gamer. You play games, so that's how we have a connection there.
Yeah.
But yeah, my kids love Micah Super Vlog. They're super fans. They randomly just say random stuff in the show. It's like all these memes, so they love the show. And so I'm really glad that you can be here with us today.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I really do love board games, and I'm a big fan of Deliverance. So, fan of you guys too. And I've been listening to the podcast, so you guys are doing some really great work. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, so before we get into the topic at hand, tell us a little bit about yourself and your project in particular, Micah.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Girish. I work on Micah's Super Vlog, and I started that about 10 years ago. And definitely a dream of mine to. I'll explain what Micah's Super Vlog is. It's a 2D animated cartoon for kids, basically of any age. Hopefully, adults like it too, but it carries the message of the Word of God. It's a Christian faith-based cartoon. It's 2D, and I kind of put it together while I was working at a nonprofit about 10 years ago called Square One World Media, and I had a very small team that put it together. In fact, it was essentially myself and another guy that put it together, and we had volunteer voice actors. So if you know anything about animation, it costs like hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars to get a season out there, and it's very time consuming, very labor intensive, and it's even though the product is very it's for kids and you'd think it'd be simple, it's quite complicated. So I've had a heart for children and children's ministry, and I've always loved to draw, so those things kind of merged in this project. And I kind of got the opportunity in a funny way where the nonprofit that I was working for was wanting new programs to put out there, new ministries. And I said, they asked me because I was like their designer. I was like their illustrator, did some books for them. I said, do you want to make a cartoon? I'm like, yes, I do. Without any idea of what I was saying yes to, because obviously it was a dream of mine to have my own cartoon, but I never really said that out loud to anyone because it was just a very big dream. And I would assume that I would, climb that ladder and it would make sense. But to just say yes to making a cartoon and going for it was I just said yes. And it took me a little, actually not too long, to realize how big of a project I had taken on. So, but I did the best I could. It went from promising, I was like, oh, I can do an episode a month, to realizing, oh, it's going to take me several months to make one episode. And I learned the hard way all the different parts of production, pre-production, everything. So everything from conceptualizing the show, who are the characters, what are we saying, to what the style of animation is going to be, and who are the voice actors and all of that, and directing. It was just going from like 0 to a million miles per hour. Just like it was unreal. But I had a lot of times where I'm like, how am I going to do this? This is not going to happen. But uh, I put my trust in God, and I really just asked Him for help. And I'll tell you, every step along the way, I could see His fingerprints, from just bringing the right people that would voice act, as a volunteer. Um, it would be friends or people I worked with. Like Micah is recorded, or is voiced by a guy that worked in the office below me, and he was like he's a musician and he's a producer and stuff like that, and he just had a kind of like a mousy voice, and that just worked out. And he was like just in the office, convenient, and he's just down to do it. He's like, yeah, sure, no problem. He like he was so great. And then my buddy who was in the UK, was just happened. He was an artist. He's the guy that was basically did all the designs for the show. He just happened to be moving back to Winnipeg, which is where I'm at. And yeah, he was down to help me for the project. And then there was one of the craziest little anecdotes of my journey in the beginning was when I was trying to figure out how to animate. Like I knew like the technical side of it, but what style, and there's a lot more to it than just knowing the mechanics of animating. I was like, what parameters do I have? Uh, I got a random email from a guy in Pine Falls who is an hour and a half north of me, and he's like, "Hey, I'm an animator, and I work on My Little Pony, and someone just came up to our church here and uh, was showing us one of the books that you made. Um, hey, what are you up to?" And I'm like, "I'm trying to animate a show, and I don't know what I'm doing." And then, and then he's like, "Well, why don't you just come on over and I'll show you some stuff?" I'm like, "Okay." I didn't know where Falls was at the time, and I drove up there, and I was like, "Am I gonna die? What's gonna?"
Catfished.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What's happening here? And then, but the guy was just the best. Like he took a day off of work to just show me the ropes, and we spent the day. He was just looking at my files and giving me tips and stuff, um, and so when I drove back, I was like, honestly, I was in tears because I was so overwhelmed. Like I didn't realize how little I knew. But things like that happened along the way, and eventually, I kind of managed my expectations of what I was going to be producing that first year. But you could see, like the show was kind of a miracle to exist, and the first episode was made in 2014, 10 years ago. It's not really online anywhere because it was kind of the pilot. It was not good. uh, I actually had what would you call it? Just a premiere at my church,
Mhm.
and I had some kids in the basement. We were showing the show, and then I remember watching their faces, and they were so bored. Like it was unreal. I was like, "Oh no, this can't." I worked so hard on this thing. I poured my heart and soul into it, and it showed me, taught me a valuable lesson. You are not entitled uh, to praise, no matter how hard you work. If something sucks, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter how hard you work at it. It's not going to change the fact that it sucks. It's like you got to be objective. You got to be harsh with your stuff and make something objectively good. So um, I just told myself I'm not gonna do this again. I'm gonna really look at my stuff and critique it, uh, because at the end of the day, this is for them. These are for kids, and I want to make sure that they're having a good time watching it. And I'm not going to stop myself because of my pride, making myself feel good along the way. Um, so
That's a
sorry, I'm
really
kind of
good
getting long-winded.
a really good point.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a pit stop right here
Yeah, sure.
because some things that you've said remind me very much of my own journey. I call them watershed moments. You know,
Hmm.
if you've been taken out behind the watershed and beaten by prospective fans that think your thing sucks, that's
Yeah.
actually a good thing for the development of something amazing.
Hmm.
There probably I can think of probably four, maybe five very significant moments in the development of Deliverance, the first game, where the color drained from my face as someone told me exactly what I knew was true,
Hmm.
and it was like as
Hmm.
if it were from the mouth of God telling me, that my game sucks,
Or the mouth of babes.
because of this, that, and the other. And it's like, this means that I'm going to need to rip out the entire engine
Hmm.
and rebuild it and put it back together before I can even move forward. And that's
Hmm.
going to be a significant amount of time. I'm working part time and on this as I'm working full time on my gig, which is now crowdfunding nerds and next level web.
Hmm.
But it's a very difficult moment, and it's a moment that you're like, should I quit now, or should I say all of this stuff?
Hmm.
I'm gonna just, my body is ready. All right, let's
Hmm.
move forward. I'm ready to take the punishment.
Yeah.
It's like this. Did you feel like that? You mentioned that you went to that animator's house. He showed you a bunch of stuff. You didn't get axe murdered, and then on your way back, you had this emotional response of crying on and like letting that stuff out. Was that a result of knowing the road, a little bit more of the road that you will have to travel in order to make this work? Um,
Yeah.
and then also, same thing apply to the after the kids
Hmm.
premiered and weren't excited about what you made.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. 100%. It was like running a marathon. Like if you and you're just starting to train, and you you sign up for a marathon, and you're starting to train, and you're starting to run, and you run 2 kilometers, and you realize, oh, 42 kilometers is a long ways. That's gonna take a long time. And and so you got a taste of the amount of work that's involved, and you kind of multiply that as best you can to get some kind of long view of what you got ahead of you. And yeah, I absolutely had to call it to God so many times, and had all these mental breakdowns during those first few months. Um, but what was interesting was that, because it was my first real steps into this show, there was a lot of first, and there was a lot of excitement that kind of kept motivating me to keep going. I think that's what really helped kept me from seeing things with a critical eye. And I think so. Like, what the first run through that was like that pilot, and I was like, oh, this is wonderful. I'm learning so much. And then once I got to that finish line, those kids helped me see what that product really was. And so I kind of built the tools to accomplish the product, to complete the product. But then they were the quality control for me. They helped me kind of put that lens on, and then I could look at the whole thing. We what we did is Stu and I, my buddy Stu and I, who was the artist, um, we kind of retooled the whole show. We redesigned the characters. We started to write more aggressively in our scripts, and make it snappier. Because like another, sorry if I'm veering off a little bit from the point, but um, uh, a factor that kind of made the first pilot was that I was kind of making it for broadcast, and I had to hit a runtime. And then that kind of changed after that was done. And it was like, let's just make it what it's supposed to be runtime wise. And then we all of a sudden can make it snappier.
so when you say make it for broadcast, we're talking about the show needs to be 22 minutes because there are 8 minutes of commercials
Yes.
or some stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I
and
made a
and
lot of
commercial breaks need
fillers.
to be here and here, or stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Like I had commercial breaks worked in there, and that's sort of how, like, there's some episodes that just kind of are jarringly, like, they'll cut to a different segment and then cut to that, like, that's where that was kind of born. I was like, I need to break this up, and then and so that way I don't do as much animating, because animating characters and scenes in action for 22 minutes is just impossible. What can I do that's more motion graphics? And so I was trying to, like, mitigate, like, my work load, and then I was creating, like, music videos and stuff like that in between. But definitely, I I had these crushing, just going back to that original question, these crushing moments where I saw myself as being not enough, not strong enough to walk those miles. And I had to call out to God again and again, and then He responded by providing. And um, I just had to be faithful for what was in front of me in the moment, and just um, uh, not allow myself to think about the entire project all at once. Because once I did, it's like it will crush you. It will crush you. It's just,
It's so big. It's like
yeah,
you're looking at the top of a mountain
yeah,
when you're at the very bottom, and
hmm,
the top of the mountain pokes above the clouds, and that's if that's what you're focusing on, like
yeah,
you can't. It's hard to even take the first step. But when you look down at your feet, it's a lot easier to take steps.
hmm,
And after a while, it's like you're surprised at how far you are, but the mountain still, the peak still looks just as far away.
yeah.
Even though you've taken, let's say you've walked a mile.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, like, you understand that completely. I mean, Deliverance is a massive game, massive undertaking,
mhm.
and add on to that, like, in the beginning, you carry that vision. If God has given you a calling and a vision, and a mission to accomplish, that's with you, and that's with your heart, and no one else carries that. Maybe, it's a lonely road, but that's how He refines you, and you got to carry that torch, and carry it until you find I don't know, the next person or whatever. Or sorry, I'm sounding like I'm handing off
it's like
the
a
project.
save point, like
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
playing Dark
exactly.
Souls, and you get cut down like partway through, and then you have to like
Right.
revive and then try again. It's like,
Yeah.
well, but I got rid of one enemy, before I got brutally cut down. So, let's try to do it
I
again.
haven't played those games, but I've actually seen people, like, I've seen some people play it, and it looks like a terrifying, difficult game. But that's probably a very good analogy
Yeah.
for what it's like. You start with a whole, like, very little, and you just have to trust that you're in the right direction, and then it's going to lead to something that's bigger. And there's a
Yeah.
whole lot of faith, that you need, a whole lot of courage, and a whole lot of vulnerability that you're going to have to face, because you know what, like, there's a cliched, unbiblical expression out there: God won't give you anything you can't handle. Totally unbiblical. Totally. How are you supposed to
Yep.
grow if He gives you just something that's derivative to your strength? Yeah. You
Yeah.
have to. He's going to grow you, and that makes, growing pains are uncomfortable. It means growing outside your parameters. And um so when you're starting off, you really have to hold on to what God has given you, and keep looking at Him and trusting Him that He's going to deliver you. And that just means um, managing your expectation, just being obedient in the moment, um, uh, and trusting that things will work out. Now, that sounds so
Yeah.
vague, and almost like,
Well, I guess the way that I would look at it, um, as I'm walking, so there are a few thoughts that I've had, as you've talked. One of the elements of just being disheartened, these moments of being disheartened. There was an experience that I had where I went to Kickstarter. Beginning was June 2021. We launched and we funded 300,000 and $314,000. There was another guy that was working on a game called The Unseen Realm, and it's actually a game that I went as soon as I learned about it. I went and I bought it. because I wanted to see how that one worked and whatnot. And that the theme of that one's a little different than Deliverance, but the
Mm.
concept of spiritual warfare
Mm.
is consistent there. And I released Deliverance first on Kickstarter, and this person, they we talked about it later. They got really, really depressed. Like I beat them to the market,
Oh.
and my game is so much better than their game,
Mm.
and all of that. And that was me looking at other people like,
Mm.
oh man, this game that I'm working on that's not, I didn't go to Kickstarter yet, like before I went to Kickstarter.
Mm.
It's like, man, this game is just not as good as that game. And that game is so much further ahead. It's like I coveted and wished I
Yeah.
was envious of others that were in the place that I wanted to be. And it was actually like every colleague, if
Mm.
you will, that
Yeah.
had a successful game was almost like a blow to my ego.
Mhm.
Like, man, this hurts because they are where I want to be, and they are experiencing the success that I want to experience, that I pine to experience one day, and that I may not, because maybe my product's not actually that good at the
Mm.
end of the day. So there's no guarantee, like you said earlier, there's no guarantee, no matter how hard you work, that your product will be received
Mhm.
Yeah,
positively and that you'll receive praise, right?
that's something I
Um,
want to tap into. Is I think when you create anything, the tendency to think is
mhm,
that, oh, this is about me. And it's, Girish, it's really easy for
yeah.
you to look at those kids and think, oh, they're just some uncultured kids. What do they know? I'm an animator. I'm a professional. And to
Yeah.
kind of just, dig your heels in the ground. Or Andrew yourself, what do you know? You're just one person and whatever. So, but I think when you have the approach where I'm actually trying to serve people, I'm trying to help others, it's not about me. And then
Mhm.
my desires should need to actually
Yeah.
disappear because I'm actually trying to help other people and bring, and we often see this where maybe you have wealthy people and they don't care what anyone else wants. They just do exactly what they want. They release things into the market. I think a sort of a good example
Mm.
of this is like Rebecca Black's Friday, and if you're familiar with that
Mhm.
music video that came out,
Yeah.
Oh
like
yeah.
I think this is a good example of
One of the
someone who's,
best music videos I've ever
yeah,
heard.
well,
I
it became a meme. It's
think I watched it more than
clearly someone
anything.
who had very wealthy parents who are willing to,
Mm.
pay for their child to make a
Yep.
music video when clearly the lyrics weren't exactly thrilling.
Oh,
But there's someone who's like, they just have enough money, they can produce this because there's no one there
Yeah.
to tell them no. Well, when
mhm,
you are creating a product that has to exist in the market by itself, then you have to listen to
right.
what people are saying. And I think coming back to this idea of like serving a higher purpose is like that. I think that's where a lot of people probably find
Mhm,
that higher purpose is and serving other people. And
mhm,
this was actually brought up by one of our colleagues, Gabe Barrett, of the sort of game of the month. He recently was on the podcast, People's Behind the Meeples with GameFound,
mhm,
and he just talked very openly. I thought this was very interesting. He talked very openly about all the projects he had and how he just cut back because he had like a
Mm.
podcast, he has a YouTube channel, he was writing books, he had like courses, he was releasing games on uh, Kickstarter and GameFound, and he had like e-commerce stores, and he just sort of what's actually working, where is actually generating income, and what are people responding to, and he just cut everything else off and
Mm.
really scaled down. I thought that's really interesting. I think it's part of this idea of continuing, and sometimes it might the avenues that are working might not actually be the things you personally want. That's something
yeah,
to
Mm.
kind of think about. You might think, oh, successful business people, they just have all this freedom, they can do exactly what they want. Well, no, they're probably successful because they don't do what they want, they do what
Yeah.
yeah.
other people want. And then that's something to kind of keep in mind, that if you are
Mm.
feeling discouraged, then that's probably not perfectly normal for successful people, is because
Mhm.
you're not going to feel fulfilled all
Yeah.
the time from the things that you do, and your
Mhm.
focus needs to be on serving other people.
Yeah, I mean, that's a
Or even
fantasy
serving
to
the
think.
project,
Mhm.
right?
Mm,
Like what you said, Girish, is you said this is, I think, such a cornerstone key of this is you you stopped imposing your will upon the project,
Mm.
and you said, I just need this project to be what it is. Like I need it to become what it is.
Mhm.
It's the Nietzsche quote, become what you are.
Yeah.
Um that's related to the projects that we make. I had a desire for Deliverance to become a dungeon crawl that was like very much like a World of Warcraft experience, where you crawled through a dungeon and explored new tiles and other things like that, and went above ground and below ground, and eventually Diablo style descended into hell and fought a boss, or something like that. And the game didn't want to be that. It was
Mhm.
like it became like this tactical combat thing that I didn't originally intend it to be. And but that was where the fun was. You know, that's where
Mhm.
everyone was like, I'm having a lot of fun doing this particular thing, but I'm not really liking the events and the narrative that I have to stop playing the game and read it now and other
Mhm.
things like that. So eventually I just stripped away what wasn't good and enhanced, or made every single system support what was fun, and then
Mm.
that thing became something different than I originally intended. And so talk about that with Micah, and Micah's super vlog, this concept of you wanted to make it a thing, but then you stopped kind of trying to impose your will upon it, if you will.
Mhm.
You started like almost like listening to it.
Mhm.
Like, what does it want to be? Can you walk us through that transition?
Yeah, for sure. There was other voices, I mean, like there was influences of like what the show is supposed to be parameter wise, run times and humor wise. And at the time I was still like very young in my like growing in this show, and I didn't know how to make this. I didn't have that much experience. So I assumed that I didn't have the answer to what the show was supposed to be. I didn't know that, like, I had I wrote some scripts by committee almost. I asked, like, I ran these like, but when I got that premiere done, that first episode done, and the kids watched it and they were bored, it was such a wake up call. And I realized, okay, something's wrong here. I need to look at this honestly, and I started to um write differently. I started to write with a little bit more confidence, and and really kind of link what I was doing with my experience as a Sunday school teacher, and just starting to be real with real life experiences. That was sort of the thing that kind of infused the show. Was I know what kids are like, and just kind of letting their energy just be what drove the show. Am I making this for a demographic, or am I making this for Michael, for well, Susie or whatever? Like these kids that were in my class, as soon as I started to make that connection, it became a personal thing, um, and it became about servitude as well. It wasn't uh, like Sean, you were mentioning, just um, making something for a greater purpose, not for yourself. I mean, there's one side of it where I'm making it out of obedience to God because I really want to share His word with others, but these others because I love these children, and it just kind of became more organic. I was like not overthinking things. I was just allowing myself to have fun. And you just sorry, Andrew, you're gonna have to remind myself of the actual question because I think I'm veered off a little bit from your point there.
This is all good. I mean, just keep talking. I
Okay.
love all the tangents, just everything that everybody is listening to, or watching if you're
Mhm.
on YouTube. Um, this is like inside the mind of a creator.
Mhm.
That's where we want to be, because a lot of people listening to this are going to say, "Well, that's where I'm at right now." And what you're doing is you're
Mhm.
preaching to the soul of the person that is struggling in the midst of this.
Right.
And for myself, yeah, I'm still struggling, just in at a different
Mhm.
level, and that's kind of where you are now. So like,
Mhm.
we're just, the intent is just to kind of give voice to the struggle, and
Mhm.
what we're talking about now is related to your kind of becoming a fan of the product yourself,
Mhm.
realizing that your audience, these are the people that your audience, it's almost like putting a face on the audience. What you did unintentionally is you started out with a target market of like, okay, my target market are children between the ages of, I don't
Mhm.
know, like 8 to 12-year old.
Mhm.
And they're in church and their parents want them to watch something nice, so that we'll do something that's like uh entertaining and educational, and that sort of thing. And then you went and got more specific, and you're like, I'm making this for these 6 specific children in
Mhm.
my school, or in my church. If they like it, then I'm doing
Mhm.
things right. And then did you start thinking about like what those specific people liked about it, or did you start to try to like figure out what specific people that were might have been in the demographic, but the named children that watched it during the premiere, like what would Michael like, or what would
Yeah.
little Susie
Mhm.
like? And did
Yeah,
that
it
help?
wasn't, like, so catered for them, like, in, like, "Oh, she likes the color blue, so I'm gonna make this
Mhm.
blue." No, it wasn't like that. It was just, like, just doing Sunday school with them, being around them, understanding the kind of energy and the vibes that they they really responded to, and just being that Sunday school teacher in my work. Because when I was in their presence, I was just like I really cared about, like, making them have fun and teaching them a lesson and just bringing them energy because kids can read authenticity. You can't fake that. And so that was something that I kind of just took with me and put that in the show. Uh, I'm like, I'm going to make this land with them um, because they're not, uh, I mean, they're, they're, they're so like, I kind of know just in my heart what they like because I spend time with them. It's just that experience, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
I go
but,
back
mhm,
every so often. I go back to this analogy of Elon Musk with
mhm,
his first big venture that he was very successful was PayPal,
mhm,
and the reason that he was successful is because he understood two things. He wasn't the world's foremost expert in merchant services. He wasn't the world's foremost expert in the internet,
mhm,
but he was the world's we'll call it the world's foremost expert in both of those things. If you took the highest level
mhm.
expert in merchant services that also understood the internet the best, it
Mhm.
was Elon Musk.
Right.
There was nobody else that kind of had a vision for doing something like that so early. And and so he was able to make that thing successful. And I look at others that make excellent products and think these people have some sort of secondary experience that makes them that adds value to what it is that they're making, that adds, as you mentioned, authenticity to what it is that they're making. If
Mhm.
like, for example, if I didn't know the Bible at all when I made Deliverance, might not come across as so authentic, right? But
Mhm.
I believe that in some ways, I believe no one else in the world could have made that. Otherwise
Right.
they would have, right? And but I had to do it because I felt like I don't. There's nobody else that understands gaming like I do,
Mhm.
and also Bible like I do. Plenty of
Oh,
people
yeah.
understand one more than me or the other more than me, but not both, right? And so that's kind of where you're combining this experience of being like a Sunday school teacher, understanding the mindset of like and how you would teach these children and animation, and applying that to
Yeah,
what
it's
he's made.
that's a good, analogy or an example, Elon Musk, like, I mean, so actually, I just compared myself to Elon Musk. Like, just the idea of, not being like, an expert on a niche part of production, I because of the uniqueness of the way Micah Superlog came together, I got to see the whole spread of, like, conception to pre-production and production post-production and kind of run through that cycle a number of times. It gives me a perspective that not most people have, uh, because in animation there's so many different sections of, like, you're a board artist, you're a director, and everything like that. But to be hands on in every single part of it is um, kind of crazy, and you kind of have to go from micro to macro perspective all the time. And I bet you totally understand that. Like, it can be exhausting, and you can get really caught in the weeds. But you have to pull yourself back and look at the whole thing and see where you are. And but that's a unique position, and that's a unique experience that I have, um, that allows me to kind of speak into those different, and so I can delegate. So where I'm at right now, just for context, we're redeveloping the show. and we have like a studio of animators and board artists and things like that, and I can direct them, but uh, I can do that only because I've gone through those paths myself. I've walked them, and I've done that for years. So there's that experience that not that I'm actually I'm actually not the greatest animator, to put it lightly. I'm actually not a great animator at all, but I have a sensibility and I have an understanding of how it works. So when I'm directing it, I can at least tell them like this is the arc I want you to take, and this is the pace I want you to do it, um and and that's just a beautiful thing that I think even when I was grinding through all those years doing most of the pieces of the project kind of myself, not that I didn't have help at all, but I was carrying a lot of the weight. It was really hard. It didn't feel very sustainable. God was still putting in me the knowledge and experience so that way I could share that with others and carry on the project and expand it and grow it. Um, and still keep that central vision, someone that kind of can um, I mean, I'm sure you understand this. Like you need someone in order for a project to really feel uh, uh, very focused. You need to have someone at the helm that can hold that vision throughout all the the thousands of different steps that are going on. Um,
Yep.
and if you lose track of that, if you look at all the things at once, you just be overburdened and you forget what it is. But you need someone to keep that singular vision.
Right.
So,
I
mhm,
look at in animation, I look at Bluey as like the pinnacle of this.
yeah.
Bluey and Ren and Stimpy each
Mm,
had, very, very different examples. Ren and Stimpy, this I don't know, crazy, wacky cartoon from the 90s
mhm.
was just so off the wall and ridiculous and stupid. And
Mhm.
modern day, I liken something like The Wonderful World of Gumball
Oh,
to
yeah.
what
That's
Ren and
insane.
Stimpy was like back in the
Yeah.
day. And there's somebody that is behind that show. It's consistent. It's like every episode is funny in its own way, but appealing in the same way.
It has a
And
personality to it.
yeah, and you look at Bluey, there is a dad that has 2 daughters
Mhm.
that, that knows what this show, like how it should work, and he clearly is like a millennial 90s kid, or whatever, and has that experience. And if you lose that one person, then the whole direction can change.
Mhm.
um I don't know if that's a fact. I don't know who's actually behind Bluey, but I know it's the greatest show ever, probably the greatest show ever
I
made.
hear that a
um
lot, but you can see when there is, like, that, vision lost, if you don't have a strong leader, that's someone that's gonna hold it together and keep your I don't know, I really wanna make a boat analogy, but I don't know boat terms, but, like, if you want to keep true north, you need that person there. Otherwise, it will be a derivative of what was there, and people would, when it comes to making things by committee, people can tell.
Mhm.
People really are attracted to something that has an identity, a personality attached to it, and when it starts to become like this is what this demographic likes, and this what it's like you look at movies these days and they're trying to make things safe and risk free because and they'll do something that has been done before and it worked before because maybe at that time it had maybe that wasn't what was the norm at the time and then they try to repeat that and they can't. That's why sequels don't always do great or
Right.
people don't get passionate about them. But yeah, I just want to kind of um get back to sort of like where like when you're in a grind and you're um, really feeling lost in your project. I think this is something that I've struggled with on every single episode of Micah's Super Vlog, and there, I can name you some of them that were really bad for me, and that was like for the Spirit Faithfulness was one of them, and then uh, Uber Jealous was another one, and uh, what was it? Boots of Peace was another one, Armor of God. And I felt like this is never going to get done. And I was um, really, really struggling with it. But I would always go and talk to someone, my buddy Stu, and get some perspective. Um, you need to find someone that you can confide in. You can't hold that on your own. Um, uh, Otherwise, like if you allow yourself to tell yourself toxic messages, you will spiral. Um, but getting an outside voice really helps. But also reminding yourself why you're doing this in the first place. Getting that macro view again, and just being like, um, knowing that that where you're headed to is going to be worth it, and then also taking the load off, showing yourself some grace, and um, maybe holding things less loosely. Because I know that in terms of the scripting world, um, I overthink sometimes, uh, like a story plot device or whatever, and I'm like trying to make it so complex, and then I need to remember that it it's not really like it doesn't need to be so complicated. Maybe it can be simplified. Is there easier way to do this? What am I? And just identifying what it is I'm trying to do, um, and then I I also think that not putting so much weight on this particular part of your job or whatever you're doing. Uh, uh, so this is a clunky way to describe it, but I find that when I was working in Sunday school, that really helped me keep my head above water because uh, my job is kind of a fulfillment of my calling. And if that was all I did, and that's the only way to do that, I feel like I would um, it, things would just have so much weight. But because I was doing Sunday school, that really helped me exercise that faithfulness muscle in me, and um, know that I was still doing what God had called me to do. And that if Micah Super Vlog had a weaker episode or something like that, I wasn't gonna give myself too much of a hard time. So um, that way I could
Mhm.
show myself some grace. But hopefully that makes sense. I know I'm saying like a few things are kind of intertwined
Yeah,
and
it
crumbling.
does make
Well,
sense.
well, one thing
Go
I'd
ahead,
like
Sean.
to maybe jump into is the paradox of serving. So you talked about having this bigger picture and focusing
Hmm.
on that, and we talked a little bit about not being about us but being about others.
Hmm.
But I recently listened to an interview by Brad Bird, who's sort of the lead director behind shows such as The Incredibles and The Iron Giant, which is some of my favorite animation films
Hmm.
out there.
Oh
And he
yeah.
talked about how, because you eventually get to a point where you get so much feedback from so many different people that you can't appease everyone, you can't serve
Hmm.
everyone. Everyone's going to have their different opinions, where you have to just
Yeah.
take direction. And one thing he said is that, when you try to go into the animation process, you're really talking about trying to predict the future, because what are people going to
Hmm.
want 2 to 5 years from now when your film is finished? And people the sensibilities change, so you really have to focus on creating the best thing you can with the things you have, with the information you have, and
Hmm.
being sort of true to that. So I think that's another way to kind of focus your design development process, because as you said, you've been working on Micah Supervlog for 10 years. I'm sure things have changed drastically in 10
Yeah.
years. So I'm sure like the issues that maybe you wanted to bring up
Hmm.
with kids have probably changed as well. So I think that's just an example of how you have to be flexible in
Hmm.
terms of where this is going, and then have a
Yeah.
broader picture. Take people's feedback, and don't make it all about yourself. But you do also have to, like, this kind of, it sounds strange. It's like, take people's feedback, but also you have to stand your ground, and
Hmm.
likewise direct and actually lead and
Yes.
sort of move things in a certain direction.
There's a definite tension between sticking to your calling and your vision, and also including feedback in there, because you may not always be objective about something. I mean, you're going to be wrong about things, but if God has placed it on your heart to make this, it's like you really got to stay true to that. So just knowing where that balance lies is really important, and that means sometimes being like, okay, well, this is important, this isn't, and holding things a little loosely. Um, yeah, one thing that's a big difference between production when I was working on at the nonprofit versus now, which is in Minnow, is that there's a lot more voices. I've got some producers and so they have a particular, maybe their own vision for something, and then they run that by me, and obviously they want to keep Micah true to itself, and they kind of, they yield to a lot of my opinions. But I also have to listen, hear them out, and this is most productions. You got to run it by producers, and it, it becomes a committee thing almost immediately. But uh, yeah, I think that that is always a really really hard thing. When I got to Minnow, um, uh, I had this kind of impression that what I was doing before was amateur and amateur hour, and let's reinvent the wheel. Let's do it the right way now, and and that's doing myself and what God has been doing in me a disservice, because obviously, hopefully, obviously, what was made in those years was something that was successful. And I say success meaning it impacted kids in a very positive way, and impacted them deeply. So um, it wasn't amateur hour if it succeeded at its goal. It was an effective. There was something good there. Um,
And to clarify it was picked up by Minnow, which is a streaming platform
right.
for basically the target audience that you intended,
Yeah.
which is kind of, in a way, like a very happy ending to the
Mhm.
struggle that you had.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like I funded successfully on Kickstarter, and then I released and did very well over the Christmas,
Mhm.
holiday season and whatnot. But when you got picked up by Minnow, and it's available to stream like right now on
Mhm.
using the Minnow app, right?
That's right.
And
Yeah.
so it's been, you've had some degree of financial success because of that,
Yeah.
right?
It was pretty crazy when that opportunity arose, because um, that was kind of low key, like kind of what I was hoping for. I was like trying to, because I knew in the back of my mind that what I was doing couldn't be done forever, because it was just a lot of weight. And I just had faith that, it's going to keep making stuff. Well, this is the climate of this production. Is That's what we're doing. And I know that eventually God will take it somewhere. And actually, it wasn't even that long until Minnow kind of reached out to me, but it was just a different kind of scenario. They were kind of partners, but the rights got bought out about several years into production. And why I made that decision was, yeah, it was time for me to allow other people into the process, to walk with me, and for myself to learn some new skills to direct, and to share that and grow the production so it's more sustainable. Um, what's the trade-off is, like, when you're working in a smaller team, it's way harder, more grindy, but you can more accurately kind of get your vision quicker. But you can still do that in a bigger team, but it's a lot more talking and explaining and delegating, and kind of wrangling that to make it happen. Um, but you do that well, and you set that a good foundation for that, and you'll be able to kind of hit the target much more often, and with success. But it's a leap of faith, really, going from one to the other, because I was like trusting myself a lot in the previous production, and now I have to trust other people to animate it, and help me write it.
So we've spoken a great deal about perseverance and
Mhm.
continuing even when you want to quit. Maybe we should talk a little bit about when you should give up. I think there is a legitimate time where you should give up. Like
Oh
Andrew, I
yeah.
know you talked about where
Mhm,
someone gave feedback and you had to basically gut the entire game. And you clearly had the desire to do that. You clearly
mhm,
had the means to do that. But I'm sure a lot of people get to that stage and like, okay, I'm not willing or I'm not able to take that step. If I take that
mhm,
step, it's probably going to negatively impact some other area of my life. I'm not willing to do that. And I think at that point, it's perfectly fine to step back. So I don't know if you guys want to
mhm.
jump into that, but I do. do you feel like some people can pursue success, quote unquote, to the
Hmm.
detriment of other areas of their life where it could harm their family, it could harm them financially, or whatever it is? So,
Or hold them back from success, right?
Hmm.
I think one of the things that I've learned is number one, to listen to my wife, because
Hmm.
if I did, it would have shaved off like 2 years of development time, for Deliverance. But you want to um, definitely take a step back and let the project be what it wants to be. Lean into what Gabe Barrett says is find the fun. Whereas the fun in the project, lean into that,
Hmm.
change, adjust systems and things to support that and enhance it, or strike them if they do not. And so I think that that's very important. But I think fail fast is the
Mhm.
is my general recommendation. Like if you're going in a direction and you're the road to success is paved with failure. Every
Yeah.
single stone is a failure,
Mhm.
and the most wealthy, successful people are self-made and all that are often the ones who have failed the most.
Yeah.
I like to tell people, like in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm a Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and whenever someone else is like, "Oh man, I got tapped out" or whatever, every so often, they'll ask like, "How do you deal with that?" For me, and I tell them that I have been tapped out more times than every other person in this room combined. And that's I just have an understanding of how to fail. You get
Hmm.
tapped out, you tap out, and then you hit the reset button and try again. And those things teach you how to do better next time. So the thing that I find that sometimes people will do is they will prolong a failure and say, "Oh no, I'm still working on
Hmm.
this," or they'll
Mhm.
everything seems fine, everything seems more great and seems wonderful because they're trying to make it look that way, but the money's not coming in and whatever. And rather than like just being honest and true to themselves, like Gabe Barrett, I love how Gabe Barrett just I keep calling him like Gabe Barrett, but his name is Gabe. Um, how how Gabe just decided, he's had
Mhm.
300 episodes of the podcast. That's not where his revenue is being generated. He sunset that podcast. Maybe he'll pick it up down the road if he has another way to kind of retool it for a different vision. But he focused himself. He said, okay, these other things that I tried
Mhm.
are not doing what I want them to do. And there's another area that is, I'm going to sunset all of those things and lead with
Mhm.
the thing that is working. And Girish, what do you have to say about that? Like failing fast?
Oh man, I'm so familiar with failing. It's crazy. I just to rewind, like before Micah and before I started doing what I was doing, just a little bit about me. I failed a lot in school, like in university. I tried to be an engineer for a bit,
Mhm.
which did not work out for me. I just wasn't, it wasn't me. And I think what I learned about that was I was really trying to do what I thought other people wanted me to do. I had bad like motivations, or like not bad motivations, but the wrong motives behind that. It wasn't really sounds so Disney, but it wasn't really being true to myself. And I allow myself to be like, okay, I want to be with my friends. This is what they're doing. God has created us completely unique from any other people, and we're just got to listen to Him. What is He's given each one of us a gift to use, and we got to listen to that. But yeah, failing. Uh, when I quit engineering, I was working at a call center, and I was just taking calls. And I remember being like, "Is this what my life is now? Just taking doing internet tech support kind of thing." Um, and that's sort of what kind of sparked something in me, being like, "I need to have a vision for my life." Uh, and I think that's a big part of recognizing what a fail is. Does it align with where you're going or not? Because it's failing and succeed is dependent on what are the measures of a success and fail. And if you don't really know where you are and where you're going, you can't know when you're off kilter. So um, I think taking some time, knowing what you want to do and why you want to do it is foundational um, to succeeding in the first place, and then recognizing what is slowing you down from that, what is taking you away from it. They all might be good things, but they may not be the right things. Um, so yeah, I think just getting a good foundation of like who you are and where you're going.
Yeah, I think another way people can maybe view success with rose-tinted glasses, and I always sort of
Mhm.
like laugh at these kind of like day in the work of, and it's clearly a glamorized version of their work day, and everything's
Mm.
perfect. They've clearly set the
Mm.
camera up, and the lighting's perfect.
Oh yeah.
They got their makeup on. Like this is just
Mhm.
a romanticized or like a fantasy version of what you actually do. I think all work is hard, no matter how
Yeah.
it manifests. I think
Mhm.
like this in the film industry, this is often the case. It's like, oh, wouldn't it be so great to be on films and on these sets and exotic places? And it's like, well, no, because you got to wake up at the early hours of the morning. You're shooting in these strange places, you're away from family. It's cold. It's just
Mhm.
Mhm.
the pay might not be particularly great. So you can have like a romanticized view of a certain industry. Uh, I know like you probably had different views of engineering when you actually sat down and tried to engineer something. Um, so I think failing fast is key, but having this sort of philosophy of, well, you never fail, you just learn, and that's
Mhm.
key, because
Mhm.
then you don't see your failures as failures, you see them as a stepping stone to something else, and you can then bring your knowledge of that failure to the next project, the next thing that you're doing, and the combination of all that failure then influences you moving forward, which then eventually leads to something that is sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. I think yeah, it's funny how I think the perspective of, I mean, look at the culture right now. There's like careers in being a maybe a TikToker or a YouTuber, and people think that work can be so glamorous, and they forget that hard work is a part of, actually there's a it's hard work is its own reward. It's just you gain something, you grow, but I think people are afraid of that. And yeah, I don't know, it's funny how the culture has changed. um
You want the thing without actually putting in the work. Even for example, I had a buddy that I wrestled with that became a YouTube star. He actually created a show called How to Catch a Cheater, and then he transitioned into soap opera and other things like that, and became a, like a it's funny. And anyway, it was funny, but that guy put out a video. I mean, so YouTube in general, you have to make content. If you're a content creator, every day you have to make
oh
content.
my
And
goodness,
if you
yeah.
don't make content every day, or on a consistent schedule, then your channel will fall off. And you can't
Mhm.
take vacations. You have to find a way to get ahead. Maybe a week's worth of videos or 2 weeks worth of videos have to be scheduled in order for you to take a vacation. And then when you come back, you got to hustle to make other videos and whatnot. And
Yeah, just a
it's
hamster
a
wheel.
brutal grind, a brutal
Yeah,
grind. And
yeah.
so, people, look at somebody who has, hundreds of thousands of subscribers or millions of subscribers, and they're like, wow, but it's a brutal grind to get there. And, you look at, I don't know, big podcasters, like Joe Rogan or
Mhm.
whatever, that guy's got 15 million downloads an episode when he brings some nobody on the podcast.
Yeah.
He did not start from nothing. Like that guy has history. He was a,
Mhm.
his first show, Fear Factor, and what those all
Mhm.
came from places, and um, we look at the biggest stars, the biggest people in the industry, and say, I want to be like that person. Well, that's the equivalent of looking up at that proverbial mountain peak when when it's peeking through the clouds and you're
Mhm.
just on the road far away like Bilbo Baggins looking at the Misty Mountain. It's
Yeah,
like
well
you've
said.
got to go through the forest, bro. Don't even just look
Well,
at the mountain for direction and then look down at your feet because you've got to walk.
it
Uh,
kind of reminds me of like when you look at people that play music. Sometimes people, I I don't know how accurate this is, but it just like feels like what we see is the cream of the crop. All these heavily produced music and or art, whatever it is. And so, unless you are seriously gifted or you know, people think, oh, I'm not a musician, I'm not creative, and they don't even try to um, exercise that muscle. Like they don't think that if unless they have some kind of gift from the get go that they shouldn't even try it. When the reality is that people work hard. They start from a place where they're not recognized. Like you wouldn't recognize how they sound or how they draw or whatever when they first start. They had to build their way up there. And I think people forget the road. The road is like hidden. Actually, there's a picture of like, when you build like a tower, a really long tower, it's like before it even starts building where you can see it above ground, they need to dig down and build all the whole foundation and make sure that that is secure. And that takes months and months and months. But when the building is built, it's like all you see is everything but that. But that's still there and that's still supporting it. And I think people forget um, that like um, that everyone is creative, and it's such a privilege and a wonderful thing to exercise your creativity, no matter what it is, whether it's like drawing or singing or whistling or whatever. And like you have to think about
He
just
gets
because you
me.
can't do it on a professional level doesn't mean you shouldn't try it and share it with other people. Um,
Was that the slap in the little
Oh,
backhand
sorry, that
compliment
was
there?
totally not supposed to be an underhanded. No, 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 I don't mean it that way. You're
That's
quite
meta
good.
joke.
You're quite.
No, no, no. For those that don't understand, I did a whistling thing for people on our that were fans that wanted to. And my whistling became legendary among Deliverance fans, and so I'm just messing with them.
Yeah, but I sometimes I have people that say like they'll talk to me and say, I can't draw a stick person. I'm like, why do you do that to yourself? It's like I I mean you don't have to draw perfectly to enjoy it. You're kind of robbing yourself from that experience because
Right.
creativity is a thing that God has given us to enjoy.
Yeah, your ability to like appreciate good art far outpaces your ability to make good art.
Hmm.
It's a lot, and the same is true with products and games and shows and everything. Like you're gonna learn what you like and don't like, a lot quicker than than being able to make something that you like.
Hmm.
And I
Right.
think that you use the term muscle a lot and
Yeah.
exercise a lot, and I am in full agreement that you need to exercise your creativity and
Hmm.
exercise, the gift in order to really, get it to a place where you can share it at a professional level, right?
Mm.
So, now we're oh, go ahead, Sean.
Or just one thing about Girish talking about, you can often view the cream of the crop of certain industries and say, oh yeah, I want to be there. But it's the same thing happens with the crowdfunding space with Kickstarters, right? You only see the successes on the front
Mhm,
page. You don't see the projects all floundering or struggling or failing. Like those don't
Hmm.
get featured on the front page. Those don't get featured
right,
anywhere on the site. And yeah, Kickstarter in a lot of ways is a graveyard of failed projects, is a graveyard of failed aspirations and hopes and dreams.
mhm,
And so it's something to keep in mind that you're sort of getting a skewed perspective of reality when you look at the cream of the crop or the projects
mhm,
exploding, and you shouldn't have I suppose the thought process, oh, I can do that too. There's
mhm,
Hmm.
you've got to
Hmm.
have, well, there's probably a lot of work that's gone into this, and if I'm going to
mhm,
achieve something like this, I'm going to have to roll up my sleeves, and it's going to take a lot of patience and perseverance, and it might not work out the way I hope or how I envision. It might actually
Mm.
change over time. And so I think keeping those perspectives, it keeps you humble, and then um, I
yeah,
think that increases your likelihood of success because you are going to persevere when things don't work out your way.
Can I just add to that? I'm hearing like what's so important is we have community because community will give you perspective. It'll keep you humble and it'll encourage you when you're down. So it'll level you out a bit. And too often people live in their own heads, and then they um, defeat themselves in their own minds.
Mhm.
Because like I mentioned, how someone will say, "Oh, I can't draw a stick person." That's them telling themselves they're a failure,
Mhm.
and it's like y- you, what are you, what are you comparing yourself to? So having a community of people to just encourage you to keep going is so important.
Mhm. Yep.
Pull you out of that rut, um, because it is I think common with people in the creative industry, um, to feel like an imposter, to feel like and comparing yourself to other people. Um, yeah, just to having that negative mindset, you need to have an outside voice. So yeah,
Yeah.
community is great.
I think encouragement it goes far. I have this superpower. When people make me feel like an idiot, I just stop surrounding myself with those people,
Mm,
and I feel so smart. It's just I have plenty of people that will challenge me that don't that they're like, Andrew, that's not right or whatever. But those people, they all want to see me succeed and
mm,
do well. They're not people that want to put their thumb on my head and keep me down,
yeah.
or make sure that I'm not getting too big for my britches, as my mom would always say. Um, they're people that want to see me rise higher, that want to see me increase, that want me to be successful, and so that's why they're not going to pull punches on
Mhm,
if something is good or not, right? I have a buddy, his name is Brighton, and he is he's not a board game designer. He's not really even a board game player, but he was so instrumental in the design of Deliverance because he was willing to tell me, like, he had a lot of experience in MMO RPGs, and I wanted to make the boss fights in my game feel like a boss fight in an MMO, and we would play, and he would give me honest feedback. He's like, I felt like I felt like I was pushing cubes around a cardboard track. I didn't feel like I was an epic hero fighting a boss or whatever.
mhm,
And that type of feedback is really important. And I think that, maybe even circling back to feedback as we come in for a landing here, um your playtesters or your people that review your stuff before it actually is finished, they are best, I guess they best serve you when they identify a problem. But
mhm,
they oftentimes they'll tell you how to fix it. Like, you need to do this. You need to change
mhm,
Micah's voice. You need to, change your animation style and whatever. And
mhm,
you need to use more blue. Um, that is oftentimes not the correct solution because you have all the parts in your head for what it is that you're working on.
mhm,
But they can identify problems. Like, this wasn't funny. This didn't
mhm,
hold my attention. Right here, it felt like it was too complicated, and they might even say, I don't know why, but I didn't like it when it said this or whatever.
mhm,
And it's like, well, why was that? It's like, maybe that's because it was a bad thing, or maybe actually it was fine, but I
mhm,
didn't tee it up and prepare the audience for that, or maybe I mismanaged their expectations right from the very beginning, or whatever. The solution is for you to decide. The
mhm,
problem is there for them to identify. So the best
mhm.
feedback is really trying to uncover problems, and it's your job and the job of your team to craft solutions and then test them again. If
Yeah.
like, I would always play a game with Brighton, and then he would say, this is a problem, and then I would make those changes, then I would just play again, and I would see
Mhm,
what feedback he had this time, and he wouldn't cite that thing. Or other people, other play tests, they would no longer cite the thing that he cited because I found a solution and it ended up working, right? And
mhm.
so I think your job as the creative is to be the one that makes those actionable changes. And that's why I think, Girish, you were talking about the vision, being the visionary. One visionary has to be the one that's like the final decision maker, right? And so, any last bits of advice you would have for others that are grinding away on a project and considering, you know, all options? Maybe I should quit, maybe I should continue. What would your advice be to your past self?
Oh yeah. It's get out there and talk to someone, uh and get some perspective, maybe go for a walk or something. Uh uh, you know, make your life kind of more than just that project. You know, maybe go for a run or whatever it is, but then come back to it and try to remind yourself why you started this in the first place. Does it still make sense? And honestly, pray. That's a big part of it. Um, don't do this just for your own self and your own glory. If you do, you'll be finding it's very empty at the end of that road. So serve others.
Yeah, great advice. One thing that I'll say is, there are people that are very uncomfortable in a room. When they walk in a room, they get social anxiety.
Mhm,
One of the best ways to reduce your social anxiety is to stop thinking about yourself and to start thinking
mhm,
about the needs of those around you.
mhm,
So if you are at, I don't know, if you're at a party or something, and you walk in the door, it's very easy to be nervous and kind of keep to yourself
mhm,
because you think everybody's looking at you and whatnot. Find somebody that needs, that where their drink is empty and you can be helpful by filling it for them. It's like, oh, can
mhm,
I help you with that? Or something as simple as an act of service like that that will help you to serve another person. It will cause you to think about other people, and as the adage goes, you will think about yourself less. Right? You won't be selfless. You'll think about you just humility is not thinking, or is not humility is not being selfless. It's about thinking about yourself less,
less, yeah.
right? And so I think that that type of so for me, I learned that I was willing to quit on myself if my goals were about me. I
Mm,
could let me down. But
mhm,
when my goals became about my wife or became about the project, my one of my first most meaningful goals in my life was to help my wife quit her job and to be a stay-at-home mommy and raise the kids. That's what she really wanted to do, and she worked hard at her jobs. But I'm like, I have to grow this business in order for us to do that. And it was just motivation. It was like I was
mm,
willing to grind it out. But if it was like I want to make money and be successful, I want to make six figures or whatever, that is
mhm,
not a meaningful goal to me. Maybe that is to someone else, but
mhm,
it wasn't to me. So I think finding a goal that is meaningful for me, it's all about others, and also in regard to my publishing company and Deliverance specifically, it's all about the project needs to be fed. I need, like, I am the one that is responsible for feeding this thing and making it happen,
mm,
and it must happen. And there, if I don't do it, no one else can do it.
mm,
And so that's kind of one of my central motivations, is that it must be released. And if I don't work on this, then it can't happen. Right. So any final thoughts from you, Sean?
No, I think I've got my final thoughts out.
All right. Well, so everybody listening, check out so on the streaming app called Minnow, look for Micah's Super Vlog by Girish Manuel, or Micah on Minnow. And from what I've heard, Micah is not done. You are going to
yeah, it's coming back next year.
yeah. Heck yeah. So from what I heard, it's you went through that second grind. You've got a lot of experience, my friend. I can't wait to have you back on the podcast.
Nice. Yeah, well,
Uh,
thanks for having me. It
Yeah, it's
was
been a
awesome, guys.
pleasure. All right, Robot Richard, do your thing.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.